Welcome to Nocturnal Tales. Tonight we travel to the Bahamas, where the harbor glitters like spilled blue glass. White houses climb above the water, palms move lazily in the breeze, and everything smells of salt, flowers, polish, and money. The well at Nassau begins on the veranda of the Royal Victoria Hotel, where a celebrated detective has been ordered to rest. And where, before the second luncheon is finished, an American journalist named Eleanor Armitage sits down at his table, places a yellowed newspaper cutting before him, and says that the official story of a famous unsolved murder is nonsense. She has come to Nassau to find the truth. Someone has searched her room. One page of her notes has been stolen, and this afternoon she is cycling alone to meet a man who refuses to give his name. As always, this tale is inspired by the spirit of the great Golden Age crime writers, but the plot, characters, and text you're about to hear are entirely our own creation. Though the historical epilogue at the end draws on real and unsolved events. This episode is brought to you by the listeners who support Nocturnal Tales on Patreon, and by those who help with one-off tips on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. If you'd like to support our work, you'll find all the links in the description. And a quick note. Our ebook, Nocturnal Tales, The Collected Mysteries, Volume 2, is available now for $3.99. 8 earlier mysteries, rewritten and expanded for the page, with original Art Deco illustrations throughout. You can find it on Patreon, Gumroad, and Buy Me a Coffee. Links in the description. Now settle in as the sun crosses the veranda. Miss Armitage cycles east along the Fort Montague Road with a notebook in her basket and a truth in her pocket. And our detective, who knows that truth is often the heaviest and most dangerous weapon of all, follows too late. Chapter 1. The Woman Who Asked Too Many Questions. I had always believed that murder, like influenza, was discouraged by sunshine. This was, as Poirot informed me before we had even left the steamer, a charming but idiotic theory. Mon ami, he said, adjusting his Panama hat before the mirror with the grave concentration of a bishop preparing for ordination, the sun does not purify the soul. It merely makes the shadows shorter. We had come to Nassau because Poirot had been ordered to rest. I do not know who first had the courage to order Hercule Poirot to do anything, but the doctor who performed this rash service had suggested sea air, warmth, and an absence of mental exertion. Poirot had accepted the first two and treated the third as a personal insult. The Bahamas received us with that deceptive politeness common to beautiful places. The harbor glittered like spilled blue glass. White houses climbed above the water. Palms moved lazily in the breeze. Everything smelt of salt, flowers, polish, and money. Paradise, I said. Poirot looked towards the pink facade of the hotel. Possibly, he replied. But paradise, Hastings, has always contained a serpent. We were staying at the Royal Victoria, where the verandas were broad. The ceiling fans turned slowly, and every guest appeared to possess either a yacht, a scandal, or both. Nassau in those days was a small place wearing the clothes of a grand resort. It had English officials, American millionaires, colonial servants, secretive bankers, widows in pearls, men who drank too early, and women who listened too carefully. It was at luncheon on our second day that Miss Eleanor Armitage came to our table. She was American, perhaps 32, with sun-browned skin, clear grey eyes, and that brisk manner some women possess when they have discovered that men become obstacles only when treated as important. She wore a pale linen dress and carried a notebook. I noticed the notebook because it was the only unbeautiful thing about her. Monsieur Poirot? Poirot rose at once. Mademoiselle. I'm Eleanor Armitage. I write for the Boston Sentinel, or used to. depending who you ask." "That sounds," said Poirot, "as though there has been a disagreement." She smiled, but only with her mouth. "There usually is when a woman asks questions people prefer answered by men." I liked her immediately. Poirot offered her a chair. She declined it. "I won't take much of your time. I only wanted to ask whether you ever met Sir Reginald Ashburn." At the name, the fan above us seemed suddenly louder. I had heard of Ashburn, of course. One could hardly come to Nassau and avoid him. Sir Reginald Ashburn, Copper King, financier, friend of governors, enemy of tax collectors, and dead man of 7 years' standing. He had been murdered in his bedroom at Westbourne House, a great white villa outside Nassau. There had been a fire, a skull wound, a young son-in-law arrested, a trial, and an acquittal that satisfied no one. "No," said Poirot. "I did not know him." "But you know the case?" "As one knows many cases from the newspapers." Miss Armitage gave him a look both searching and disappointed. "Then you'll know the official story is nonsense." Poirot's eyes rested on her. "The official story, mademoiselle, is that a man was accused and acquitted. That is not a story, that is an escape route." She placed a folded newspaper cutting on the table. It was old, yellowed, and much handled. Poirot did not touch it. "I came here because of Ashburn," she said quietly. "I think someone here knows who killed him. I think that person is still afraid of the truth. And I think—" She stopped. For the first time I saw the confidence flicker. Poirot said gently, "You think you are being watched." Miss Armitage looked past us towards the far end of the veranda. At a table near the rail sat a thin man with a red, peeling face and a white suit too tight across the stomach. He had a glass of rum before him and pretended to read a newspaper upside down. "There are worse things than being watched," she said. Poirot followed her glance, then looked back at her. "You have gone to the police?" She gave a small laugh. "I went to a magistrate. He advised me to enjoy the beaches." A sound suggestion, perhaps. "Not when someone has searched your room." That interested Poirot. "Ah." "And not when the only thing taken was 1 page from your notes." "What page?" "The page naming a man who lied at the Ashburn trial." She leaned closer then, and her voice dropped. "I'm going out this afternoon to meet someone. He says he has proof. A letter, maybe more. If he's genuine, I'll bring it to you tonight." "You know this person?" "No." "His name?" "He gave none." I broke in. "Surely you don't mean to go?" She looked at me with a faint amusement. "Captain Hastings, if women refused to meet strange men, half the crimes of the British Empire would remain undiscovered." Poirot did not smile. "Where is this appointment?" "Near Fort Montague. I am to cycle there at 4. Do not go alone." "I must." That was the condition. "Then do not go at all." Her expression hardened. "That is what everyone on this island wants me to do, Monsieur Poirot. Stop, leave, forget. I didn't cross an ocean to take advice from frightened men." She rose. Poirot said, "Mademoiselle Armitage." She turned. "When you go to meet a person who refuses his name, choose carefully what you carry in your pocket." She tapped the notebook. "I carry the truth." Poirot's face became very grave. "That, alas, is often the heaviest and most dangerous weapon of all." She left us then, moving quickly across the veranda and down the steps into the white blaze of afternoon. The man with the peeling face watched her go. Then, seeing Poirot watching him, he folded his upside-down newspaper, rose, and disappeared into the hotel. I waited until Miss Armitage was out of sight. "Poirot, we cannot allow her to go alone." "My friend, she has already gone in her mind. The body merely follows. Then we follow the body. Poirot sighed. The rest cure, it appears, has suffered a complication. At 3:15, we saw her cycling east along the road beyond the hotel, a straw hat tied beneath her chin, the notebook in the basket before her. She did not look back. We hired a motor car with an elderly driver who smelt strongly of cloves and disapproved of haste. This was unfortunate, since Poirot now desired haste above all things. By the time we reached the road near Fort Montague, the afternoon had begun to change. A veil of cloud had moved across the sun. The sea, which had been blue enamel at luncheon, had turned the color of steel. A few goats wandered near a stone wall. Beyond it lay scrub sand and the low white shapes of houses half hidden by palms. We found the bicycle first. It lay on its side near a track, one wheel still turning a little in the breeze. The notebook was not in the basket. Poirot got out of the car without a word. There are moments in every investigation when the air itself seems to pause. I felt it then. The insects hummed. Somewhere, a dog barked once and was silent. A boy appeared from behind the wall, barefoot, wide-eyed. "Mister," he said, pointing, "there's a lady down there." We followed him through the scrub to an old stone well, half covered by boards and weeds. I looked once and wished I had not. Miss Eleanor Armitage lay below in shallow dark water, one arm bent beneath her, her pale dress spread like a torn flower. Poirot removed his hat. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he bent down and picked something from the dry grass near the well. It was small, white and square. A hotel laundry ticket. He held it between finger and thumb. "So," he murmured, "she came to Nassau for a dead man's secret. And now, Hastings, someone has made of her a second secret." Above us the clouds closed over the sun. Chapter 2. The Laundry Ticket. It is a strange thing, but the dead acquire a kind of authority over the living. Only an hour before, Miss Eleanor Armitage had been a brisk, determined young woman with too much courage and too little caution. Now, lying at the bottom of that neglected well, she had become something else entirely, a question that would not be refused. The local constable arrived first, then a sergeant, then a thin, sunburnt police inspector named Cartwright, whose expression suggested that death had committed an administrative inconvenience. He was civil enough to Poirot, but not warm. "Monsieur Poirot, is it?" he said. "I have heard your name." "One hopes," said Poirot, "not always in connection with corpses." Inspector Cartwright did not smile. "You found the body?" "Our young guide found it. Captain Hastings and I followed him." The boy, who had by now become the center of tremendous importance, nodded solemnly and immediately asked whether there would be a reward. Cartwright told him to go home. The boy vanished with the air of a disappointed witness. Miss Armitage was brought up from the well under circumstances I shall not describe. There was blood at the temple, but not much. Her notebook was missing. Her handbag, however, remained with her, soaked through and useless. In it were a little money, a lipstick, a pencil, a folded hotel bill, and a return ticket to Boston, dated for the following week. "She was leaving soon," I said. "Or wished someone to believe it," murmured Poirot. Cartwright turned sharply. "What is that?" "Nothing. A habit of speech." The inspector glanced at him without affection and continued examining the ground. There were bicycle tracks, footprints, and the confused marks of the many men now trampling about the place. Poirot winced. "Inspector, if I may suggest—" "No, Monsieur Poirot, you may not." Poirot bowed. "As you please." I knew that bow. It meant Inspector Cartwright had been placed in a mental file labeled Obstacle Minor. On the road back to the hotel, Poirot was unusually quiet. He held the laundry ticket in his gloved hand and studied it as though it were a fragment of scripture. "What does it tell you?" I asked. "That someone was careless." "The murderer?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps the victim. Or perhaps someone who wishes us to think one of them was careless." "That is rather wide." "Truth often enters by a narrow door, Hastings, but falsehood arrives with luggage. At the Royal Victoria, Miss Armitage's death had already become public property. News travels quickly in small communities and almost indecently fast in hotels. By the time we reached the veranda, 2 elderly ladies from Philadelphia had declared it suicide, murder, heat stroke, and the judgment of God in that order. The hotel manager, Mr. Pritchard, met us in the lobby. He was a soft, anxious man with brilliantined hair and a carnation wilting in his buttonhole. "Terrible business, Monsieur Poirot. Terrible. We pride ourselves on the safety of our guests." "The dead, I have observed," said Poirot, "are poor advertisements." Mr. Pritchard swallowed. "Quite." Poirot showed him the laundry ticket. "Is this from your hotel laundry?" Mr. Pritchard examined it and looked relieved. "No, not ours." "Certain?" "Our tickets are blue. This is white." "Do you know whose it is?" He hesitated. "It looks like the Imperial Laundry. They serve several private houses, some smaller hotels, and the yacht club." "The yacht club?" I asked. Mr. Pritchard lowered his voice. "Half Nassau sends linen there, the other half sends secrets." Poirot's eyes gleamed faintly. "An excellent establishment." We requested Miss Armitage's room. Mr. Pritchard protested naturally and then yielded naturally once Poirot mentioned informing Inspector Cartwright that the hotel manager had obstructed the preservation of evidence. Her room was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the harbour. It was neat in the way of a person accustomed to leaving quickly. Clothes folded, hat boxes closed, correspondence tied with string. But the desk had been disturbed. One drawer had been forced with a knife or narrow blade. Papers had been searched and replaced badly. A blotter lay at an angle. There was a faint scratch on the polished wood. Poirot stood in the centre of the room, sniffed delicately, then shook his head. "What is it?" I asked. "Rum, tobacco, pomade, and fear." "You can smell fear?" "No. But it sounds impressive, does it not?" He went to the washstand. On the marble top lay a glass with a film of cloudy water at the bottom. Beside it, a small envelope had been torn open. Nothing remained inside. Poirot lifted the envelope with tweezers. "No postmark," he said. "Delivered by hand." On the front in block capitals was written 4 o'clock, Fort Montague Road, come alone. "So that was the message," I said. "Yes. It proves she was lured. It proves she received an invitation. We do not yet know whether the person who wrote it expected her to die." That seemed to me a distinction without much practical use. Poirot then examined the wastepaper basket. It contained 2 torn drafts of an article. Miss Armitage had written fast and crossed out savagely. I smoothed the largest piece on the desk. "Listen to this," I said. "Sir Reginald Ashburn was not killed by a madman, nor by a jealous son-in-law, but by a conspiracy of convenience. In Nassau, innocence is less useful than silence." Poirot nodded slowly. She was not timid, this one. Another scrap read, "The witness lied about the gloves. Ask L why the laundry mark changed after trial." "L?" I said. Poirot held up the white laundry ticket. "Perhaps," he said, "we have found the beginning of the alphabet." At that moment there was a sound from the corridor. Not a knock, a movement. Poirot crossed the room with astonishing speed for a man so particular about his shoes. He opened the door. A maid stood outside, frozen, holding a stack of towels. She was young, dark-skinned, and very frightened. "Excuse me, sir, I did not know—" Poirot's voice softened. "Mademoiselle, what is your name?" "Ruth, sir." "You knew Miss Armitage?" Ruth looked down at the towels. She asked questions. "That is not an answer." "No, sir, but it is a truth. Did she ask you questions?" Ruth nodded. "About the Ashburn house. About the night Sir Reginald died. About who washed the sheets." Poirot became still. "And what did you tell her?" The girl's fingers tightened around the towels. "I told her nothing." "Because you knew nothing?" "No, sir." "Because you were afraid?" Her eyes filled suddenly with tears. "Because the last woman who asked got herself killed." Then she looked past Poirot into the room, saw the torn envelope on the desk, and whispered one name: Lennox. Before Poirot could speak, footsteps sounded at the end of the corridor. Inspector Cartwright appeared, red-faced and angry. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I must ask you to leave this room immediately." Poirot turned to him with perfect courtesy. "But of course, Inspector." He placed the laundry ticket carefully inside his pocket. "We have only just begun." Chapter 3. The Man Who Hated Questions. Inspector Cartwright's dislike of Poirot became, by the following morning, almost official. He had sent a note to the hotel requesting that Monsieur Hercule Poirot refrain from independent interference in a matter properly belonging to the Bahamian police. Poirot read this aloud at breakfast, placed the note beside his coffee cup, and regarded it with admiration. "It is well phrased," he said. "The man has the soul of a clerk and the temper of a boiled lobster." "You mean to obey?" Poirot buttered his toast. "Hastings, I am here for my health. A little walking is recommended." This little walking, naturally, took us directly to the Imperial Laundry. It stood behind a row of shops near Bay Street, a long, low building with a corrugated roof, white walls stained by steam, and open windows from which issued the smell of soap, hot linen, and damp cotton. Inside, women worked over tubs and irons with that brisk efficiency which makes gentlemen instantly aware of their own uselessness. The proprietor was a Mrs. Amelia Lennox. She was a large woman of about 50, with iron-grey hair pinned severely beneath a white cloth cap. Her arms were bare to the elbow, strong as a sailor's, and she looked at Poirot as if he were a crease that had refused to come out of a collar. "You're the detective," she said. "I am Hercule Poirot. I know who you are. Nassau has had nothing else to chew on since yesterday." Poirot bowed. "Then Nassau has a good appetite." "It has a cruel one." That silenced even Poirot for a moment. He produced the white laundry ticket. "Madame, do you recognize this?" She took it, glanced once, and handed it back. "Ours." "To whom was it issued?" "I don't discuss customers." "A young lady is dead. You think I don't know that?" Her voice had sharpened. Several of the women nearby had slowed their work. Poirot's manner softened. "Madame Lennox, Miss Armitage came to Nassau asking about Sir Reginald Ashburn. She was killed after coming here perhaps to meet someone. Your name was spoken last night by a maid at the Royal Victoria." Mrs. Lennox's face altered very slightly. It did not become frightened. It became shut. "Ruth talks too much. She talks because she is afraid. She has reason." "Of whom?" Mrs. Lennox wiped her hands on her apron. "Of Nassau." It was an answer that annoyed me, but seemed to interest Poirot. "You laundered for Westbourne House at the time of Sir Reginald's death?" "Yes." "And for members of the household?" "For half the island, if their linen was worth washing." "The gloves," said Poirot. The room went quiet. Mrs. Lennox turned her head slowly. "What gloves?" Poirot looked at her mildly. "The gloves about which Miss Armitage asked questions. For a second I thought Mrs. Lennox would refuse everything. Then she laughed, but without amusement. She was like a terrier, that woman. Came here 2 days ago. Asked about sheets, shirts, collars, gloves, stains, initials, everything. I told her what I told the police 7 years ago." "And what was that?" "That I washed what I was given. Nothing more?" "Nothing more that mattered." "Ah," said Poirot, "that phrase is always dangerous." Mrs. Lennox leaned closer. "You want truth, Monsieur Poirot? Truth doesn't behave well in places like this. It gets dressed for dinner, it smiles at church, it sits under fans and drinks gin. And when poor women touch it, poor women get burned." There was a bitterness in her that could not have been manufactured. Poirot said gently, "And Miss Armitage touched it?" "She poked it with both hands." Before Poirot could answer, a man stepped through the side door. He was perhaps 45, tall, sunburnt and handsome in a spoiled fashion. His white linen suit was expensive but careless, his eyes bloodshot, his mouth weak. He stopped when he saw us. Mrs. Lennox stiffened. "Mr. Harcourt." The man gave a short laugh. "My shirt's ready, Mrs. Lennox?" "They'll be sent round." "I prefer to collect what is mine." His gaze moved to Poirot. "And who the devil are you?" Poirot bowed. "Hercule Poirot." The name had an effect. Mr. Harcourt's face became still. "Ah, the Belgian." "You have the advantage of me, monsieur." "Philip Harcourt. I knew Reggie Ashburn. Everyone did." "Did you also know Miss Armitage?" Harcourt's eyes flickered. "The American woman? I saw her at the hotel." "Only saw her?" "What else should I have done?" "Answered her questions, perhaps." Harcourt smiled, showing very white teeth. "She had enough questions to sink a boat." "You did not care for them?" "I do not care for strangers who arrive in Nassau and begin digging in old graves." Poirot nodded. "And yet old graves, monsieur, are often shallow." The man's face darkened. "Take advice, Monsieur Poirot. Nassau looks soft. It isn't. People who forget that tend to meet accidents." It was said lightly, but his eyes had none of the lightness. Mrs. Lennox snapped, "That is enough, Mr. Harcourt." He turned on her. "You should remember your place." She did not flinch. "I remember it every morning. That is why I recognize yours." For a moment I thought he might strike her. Then he laughed again, collected a brown paper parcel from the counter and walked out. Poirot watched him go. "An emotional gentleman," he murmured. "A drunken bully," I said. "The two are often cousins." Mrs. Lennox busied herself with a basket of folded linen. "That man was at Westbourne House the night Sir Reginald died?" She said nothing. "Madame?" "Yes." "In what capacity?" "In the usual capacity of Mr. Harcourt." "Which is?" "Being where he should not." That was all she would say. We left the laundry shortly afterwards. Outside, Bay Street shone under a pitiless sun. Carriages rattled past. Sailors laughed near the docks. A woman in a yellow dress carried flowers as though death had not visited the island at all. Poirot did not speak until we had turned away from the main road. "Hastings, make me a list." "Of what?" "Of the persons who were disturbed by Miss Armitage." "Inspector Cartwright, certainly." "No, he was annoyed. That is not the same thing." "Mrs. Lennox?" "She is afraid, but not of us." "Mr. Harcourt?" "Ah, him, yes. He hates questions because questions remove curtains." "And Ruth?" "Ruth knows a name, but not perhaps its meaning." We were nearing the hotel when a servant boy came running down the steps, waving his arms. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain." "What is it?" I cried. "The ladies' room, sir. Someone been in again." We hurried upstairs. Miss Armitage's room had been searched more violently than before. Drawers hung open, clothes lay scattered. The mattress had been dragged partly from the bed, but nothing of obvious value had been taken. Poirot moved to the dressing table. There, propped against the mirror, stood a small object I had not seen before. A woman's glove. White kid, stained faintly at the wrist. Beside it, written in lipstick across the mirror, were 5 words. She should have left it alone. Poirot stood very still. Then he turned to me, and his face for once had lost all its comedy. "Mon ami," he said softly, "this is not fear only. It is anger." The ceiling fan turned above us with a slow, indifferent click. Chapter 4. The Glove on the Mirror. The glove lay upon the dressing table like a challenge. I had seen gloves in many circumstances, on dancing women, on dead women, in railway carriages, beneath restaurant tables, and once, memorably, in Poirot's soup, though that had been an accident involving a duchess and a very excitable waiter, but I had never before seen a glove that seemed to possess a temper. Poirot did not touch it at once. He stood looking from the glove to the words on the mirror. She should have left it alone. An ugly sentence, I said. Ugly, yes, but interesting. In what possible way? It is not written you should leave it alone. It is written of Miss Armitage. The warning is not to us alone, Hastings. It is an accusation against the dead. Inspector Cartwright arrived 10 minutes later in a condition of high colonial fury. "I warned you, Monsieur Poirot, not to interfere." "Indeed," said Poirot, "and now, as you see, someone else has interfered much more energetically." Cartwright glared at the room. "Who discovered this?" "We did." "Naturally." Poirot inclined his head. "Inspector, observe the glove. It is not merely placed. It is exhibited. The murderer, or someone close to the murderer, is becoming theatrical." Cartwright took the glove up between 2 fingers. "Looks like a woman's." "That," said Poirot, "is the opinion of a man who has never bought gloves for women." Cartwright flushed. "The size?" "Small, but not very small. Expensive kid. English make, I think. The stain at the wrist is old. Blood? Perhaps. Or rust or hair dye. Or medicine. The world offers many stains." The inspector put it into an envelope with unnecessary roughness. "Enough. I'll handle this." Poirot sighed. "Ah, but will you handle it with both hands?" Cartwright gave him a look which would have withered a less carefully dressed man, then turned to the hotel manager. "Who had access to this room?" Mr. Pritchard looked as if he might confess to anything simply to reduce the number of questions. "Housemaid, sir. Myself. The assistant manager. Police yesterday. Monsieur Poirot regrettably. Perhaps a porter." "That narrows it to half Nassau," I said. Poirot coughed gently. I subsided. It was Ruth who provided the most useful information, though she did so unwillingly, and only after Poirot spoke to her away from the others, in the little service passage, where trays, brooms, and human truths were stored. "You saw someone?" he asked. "No, sir." "You heard someone?" She hesitated. "A woman crying." "When?" "After luncheon, in this corridor." "You recognized the voice?" "No, sir." Poirot watched her. "Ruth!" The girl twisted her apron. It sounded like Mrs. Elspeth Ashburn. I knew the name. Elspeth Ashburn was Sir Reginald's widow, still resident at Westbourne House, still wealthy, still apparently magnificent. She was one of those women one heard about before one met them, which is generally a bad sign. Poirot's eyes sharpened. "The widow was here?" "I don't know, sir. I only heard crying." "And did Miss Armitage know Lady Ashburn?" "She went there yesterday morning." "To Westbourne House?" Yes, sir. Poirot said nothing for a moment. Then he asked, "Did she return troubled?" Ruth nodded. She looked angry, not frightened, angry. Poirot's face became grave. "That is twice." "What is twice?" I asked when Ruth had gone. "Anger, Hastings. Miss Armitage angered someone. The message in lipstick is angry. Harcourt is angry. The past is angry. That is not the same thing as greed or caution. It is more dangerous." That afternoon we drove to Westbourne House. It stood outside Nassau upon a rise of land, a white villa with green shutters and a view of the sea so beautiful that it seemed almost indecent. Bougainvillea climbed the walls in violent colour. The garden was trimmed, watered, and intensely silent. Wealth, I have observed, is often noisier in cities than in the countryside. In the tropics it becomes quiet and watchful. Lady Elspeth Ashburn received us in a shaded drawing-room. She was perhaps 50, though it was difficult to be exact. Some women age, others simply become better lit. She wore black linen, pearls, and an expression of permanent fatigue. Her hair was silver blonde, waved close to the head. Her hands were thin, beautiful, and restless. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I wondered when you would come." "Then you expected me?" In Nassau, one learns to expect every unpleasantness before tea. Her voice was cool, but her eyes betrayed her. They moved once to the mantelpiece, where a portrait of Sir Reginald Ashburn stood in a silver frame, a large, powerful man with a hard mouth and eyes that had probably enjoyed obedience. Poirot followed the glance. "You still keep his photograph prominently. He built this house." "That is not quite the same as deserving the mantelpiece." Lady Ashburn smiled faintly. "You are less polite than your reputation." "Impossible, madame. My reputation is for truth, not politeness." She invited us to sit. Tea was brought by a silent servant. I noticed that Lady Ashburn did not drink hers. Poirot said, "Miss Eleanor Armitage came to see you yesterday morning." The cup in Lady Ashburn's hand trembled once. "Yes. What did she want?" "To exhume my husband." "With a spade?" "With questions." "And you objected?" "Monsieur Poirot, my husband has been dead 7 years. Must I answer for him indefinitely?" "Perhaps not for him, but perhaps about him." Her mouth tightened. She was vulgar. American newspapers have a genius for dressing vulgarity as courage. I was about to protest, for I had liked Miss Armitage, but Poirot spoke first. "Was she wrong?" Lady Ashburn looked at him. "She was cruel." "In what way?" "She believed truth to be a lamp. It is not. Sometimes it is a knife. It cuts the innocent as easily as the guilty." Again that note. Not fear. Pain. Poirot leaned forward. "Madame, did you go to the Royal Victoria today?" "No." "You are certain?" "Quite." "Did you send anyone?" "No." "Do you own a pair of white kid gloves?" Lady Ashburn laughed softly. "I own 20. One pair with a stain at the wrist." Her face went absolutely still. "What are you implying?" "I imply nothing, I ask." She stood. "Then ask Inspector Cartwright. He already searched my life once and found enough to satisfy gossip. I will not assist another little theatre." Poirot rose too. "One more question. Did Miss Armitage show you anything?" "No." "Did she say one name?" Lady Ashburn turned towards the window. "She said many names. My husband's, my son-in-law's, Philip Harcourt's, Amelia Lennox's, mine." Her voice dropped. "And another she had no right to say." "What name?" But Lady Ashburn had recovered herself. "This interview is over." As we were shown out, I glanced back through the open drawing-room door. Lady Ashburn had gone to the mantelpiece. She stood before her dead husband's portrait and very slowly turned it face down. Outside, Poirot paused beneath the bougainvillea. "Well," I said. She lied. "About going to the hotel?" "Possibly." "About the gloves?" "Certainly." "Then she is involved?" Poirot looked toward the glittering sea. "Everyone here is involved, Hastings. That is the difficulty, but involvement is not murder." As we reached the motor car, a man stepped from the side path. Philip Harcourt. He looked pale beneath his sunburn, and he had not troubled to hide the fact that he had been listening. "Leave Lady Ashburn alone," he said. Poirot regarded him mildly. "You defend her with warmth." "I defend her from scavengers." "Miss Armitage was called something similar, I think." Harcourt's jaw tightened. "That woman came here to rip open wounds she did not understand." "And you understood them?" For one instant the man's face changed. Behind the arrogance, I saw something raw and miserable. I understood enough. Then he turned and walked away through the garden. Poirot watched him until he vanished. "Ah," he said softly, "now we begin to approach the heart." "The heart of the crime?" "No, Hastings, worse. The heart of the people." Chapter 5. The Woman in the Blue Hat. That evening, Nassau became polite. It is one of the more alarming habits of civilized places that when murder walks in at the front door, everyone immediately improves their manners. At dinner, voices lowered. Glasses were lifted more carefully. Ladies laughed a little too soon, and men pretended not to look towards the table where Miss Eleanor Armitage had sat 2 days earlier with her notebook and her inconvenient courage. Poirot observed it all with melancholy satisfaction. Behold, Hastings, the social instinct. When danger appears, people arrange the knives and forks. "You think the murderer is here?" "I think, mon ami, that several people here are dining with bad digestion." Across the room sat Philip Harcourt, drinking steadily and speaking to no one. Near the windows, Inspector Cartwright dined with a colonial official and wore the expression of a man who would rather arrest the soup than ask for help. Lady Ashburn was not present, but a woman in a blue hat was. I noticed her first because she noticed us. She was about 40, perhaps older, with dark hair, a neat figure, and one of those calm, watchful faces that can become invisible in a crowd if they choose. Her dress was plain but expensive. She ate alone, and when Poirot glanced her way, she lowered her eyes too late. "You know her?" I asked. "No." "She knows you." "That," said Poirot, "is less unusual." After dinner, as we crossed the veranda, she rose from a wicker chair. "Monsieur Poirot?" He bowed. "Madame?" "My name is Claire Weatherby. I was acquainted with Miss Armitage." "Acquainted?" "We spoke twice, that is sometimes enough." Her voice was English, dry, controlled. She had the air of a woman who had trained herself not to tremble. "She came to see me the morning before she died," Mrs. Weatherby continued. "She asked whether I knew Westbourne House." "And did you?" "I was companion to Lady Ashburn for 6 months after Sir Reginald's death." That was interesting. Poirot's eyes brightened. "Then you were there during the aftermath?" "I was there while the house pretended not to collapse." "Why do you tell me this now?" "Because Inspector Cartwright is a fool." This blunt assessment pleased me more than it should have. Poirot said, "And because?" Mrs. Weatherby looked towards the dark garden. "Because Miss Armitage was not afraid when she came to me. She was angry. People keep saying she was reckless. That is not true. Reckless people do not listen. She listened very carefully." "What did she ask you?" "Whether Lady Ashburn had cried after her husband died." I confess this seemed an odd question. Poirot did not think so. And what did you answer? That she had cried before. Before? Mrs. Weatherby nodded. The night before Sir Reginald was killed, there was a dinner at Westbourne House. I was not at table, of course, but I heard enough. They quarrelled. Sir Reginald, Lady Ashburn, Mr. Harcourt, and a young man named Daniel Merritt. At the last name, Poirot became perfectly still. Merritt? A secretary, or something near it. Sir Reginald used men as one uses matches, struck them, burned them, threw them away. And this Daniel Merritt? He left Nassau soon after the trial. Some said he was sent away, some said he fled. And Miss Armitage asked about him? She asked one question only. Mrs. Weatherby's voice dropped. Was Lady Ashburn in love with him? The warm night seemed suddenly less warm. And was she? I asked. Mrs. Weatherby gave me a cool look. I was a paid companion, Captain Hastings, not a confessor. But I know what I saw. What did you see? Asked Poirot. A woman standing outside a closed door at 2 a.m. with her hand over her mouth to stop herself crying. Before Poirot could reply, a sharp laugh came from the doorway behind us. Philip Harcourt stood there, a glass in his hand. Good God, Claire, still selling little tragedies by the yard? Mrs. Weatherby turned white. Poirot looked from one to the other. You know each other. Harcourt smiled unpleasantly. Nassau is small. Its memories are smaller. Mrs. Weatherby said, Go away, Philip. Gladly. But first perhaps you might tell Monsieur Poirot how many stories you have embroidered since leaving Westbourne House. I embroidered nothing. No, you were always very good with needles. There was cruelty in it. Not the grand cruelty of a villain in a melodrama, but the casual, intimate cruelty of a man who knows where an old wound lies. Poirot stepped between them. Monsieur Harcourt, you are disturbing Madame. I am preventing her from making a spectacle of grief. Grief, said Poirot, does not require your permission. For a second I thought Harcourt would strike him. Instead, he drained his glass, set it down with exaggerated care, and walked away. Mrs. Weatherby sat down abruptly. Forgive me. Poirot's voice was gentle. Madame, Miss Armitage asked about love. Yesterday someone placed a glove in her room with an angry message. Today people speak of old wounds. This is not a case of money, I think. It is a case of the heart. And the heart, when it has been humiliated, becomes very stupid, and sometimes very precise. Mrs. Weatherby looked at him. Then you understand danger. I understand vanity, Madame. It is almost the same thing. Later that night, Poirot insisted we walk once more along the Fort Montague road. I protested that sensible men did not revisit murder scenes by moonlight, but Poirot replied that sensible men rarely solved murders, which I felt was unfair. The road was silvered by moonlight. The palms moved softly. The old well lay beyond the scrub, now guarded by a constable who was asleep with admirable sincerity. Poirot ignored him and examined the ground near the bicycle tracks. He seemed especially interested in a patch of crushed grass some distance from the well. There, he said. What? 2 people stood here. How can you tell? Because one was calm and the other was not. That is not an explanation. No, it is an observation. He pointed to the sand near the track. I saw marks there, the narrow print of a woman's shoe, and beside it the deeper scuff of a man's heel turning sharply. Miss Armitage met someone before she reached the well, said Poirot. They argued. She turned away. He followed. He? Possibly. Do not look so pleased, Hastings. Women also wear heavy shoes when the roads are bad. Then Poirot bent and picked something from a thorn bush. It was a torn thread of blue fabric. "The woman in the blue hat," I whispered. "Perhaps. Then Mrs. Weatherby was here?" "Perhaps." "Poirot, you are becoming infuriating." "I have always been so. You are merely tired." He placed the blue thread carefully in an envelope. As we returned to the motor car, a sound came from the road ahead. A woman's voice. Not crying now, singing. Very softly from somewhere beyond the palms came the first lines of an old drawing-room song, the sort one might hear after dinner in an English house when the lamps were low and no one had yet become unhappy. Poirot stopped dead. "What is it?" I whispered. He raised a hand. The song faded. In the moonlight, on the white road ahead, stood Lady Ashburn. She wore no hat. Her silver hair shone like a ghost's. In one hand, she held a pair of white kid gloves. And though she looked straight at us, I had the dreadful impression that she did not see us at all. Chapter 6. The Thing She Loved. Lady Ashburn stood upon the moonlit road like a woman walking in a dream. Poirot went to her at once. "Madame." She looked at him, and slowly the present returned to her eyes. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I have remembered where I put them." She held out the gloves. They were white kid, yellowed a little with age. At the wrist of the right glove was a faint brown stain. Poirot took them gently. "These are yours?" "Yes." "And the glove left in Miss Armitage's room?" "Not mine, but it was meant to make you think so." "By whom?" She closed her eyes. "Philip." The name came not as accusation but as surrender. We brought her back to Westbourne House. Poirot sent a servant to fetch Inspector Cartwright, Mrs. Lennox, Mrs. Weatherby, and Philip Harcourt. I confess I thought this dramatic, but Poirot maintained that some truths must be spoken before the people who had helped to bury them. Harcourt arrived last, untidy, pale, and sober. When he saw Lady Ashburn, his face changed. "Elspeth, what have you done?" Poirot answered for her. "She has done, monsieur, what you feared most. She has remembered." Harcourt gave a sharp laugh. "Is that your great revelation? Memories? Nassau is full of them. Most are lies." "Not this one." Poirot placed the old gloves upon the table. 7 years ago, at Westbourne House, Sir Reginald Ashburn quarrelled with his wife. Not over money, not over politics, over love. He had discovered that Lady Ashburn loved Daniel Merritt. Lady Ashburn said nothing. Her hands were folded in her lap like dead birds. Poirot continued. Sir Reginald was not merely angry, he was cruel. He dismissed the young man. He humiliated him before guests. He told his wife that Merritt would be ruined if she made one gesture towards him. Mrs. Weatherby whispered, "Yes." Harcourt here was present. He had loved Lady Ashburn for years, quietly perhaps, foolishly certainly. He could endure her marriage. He could endure her not loving him, but he could not endure seeing her broken by another man. Harcourt's mouth twisted. "You make me sound noble." "No, I make you sound dangerous." Poirot turned to Lady Ashburn. "That night you went to your husband's room wearing these gloves. You meant to plead for Merritt. There was a quarrel. Sir Reginald struck the table. A lamp fell. Perhaps there was blood from his own hand or yours. You ran out. You lost one glove." Lady Ashburn's voice was barely audible. "I thought he would destroy Daniel." Later, Harcourt went in. "No," Harcourt said. Poirot ignored him. He found Sir Reginald alive, furious, and perhaps laughing. There are men who laugh at the precise moment when they should be silent. Harcourt killed him. Not for inheritance, not for gain. Because his vanity could not bear that another man possessed the power to make Lady Ashburn suffer. Harcourt stepped forward. "You little foreign mountebank." Poirot's voice cracked like a whip. "Sit down." To my astonishment, Harcourt did. Poirot picked up the newer glove from the police envelope. After the murder, there was confusion. The fire, the servants, the police. Mrs. Lennox washed linen from the house and noticed that one glove was missing from Lady Ashburn's pair. Later another glove appeared. Wrong in age, wrong in stitching, wrong in the mark near the wrist. A substitute. Harcourt had tried to replace what had been lost. Mrs. Lennox said quietly, "I saw it. I knew it wasn't the same." "And said nothing," said Cartwright. She looked at him with contempt. "To men who had already chosen their story?" Poirot went on. "Miss Armitage discovered the same fact. Not from papers. Not from secret documents. From people. From Ruth. From Mrs. Lennox. From Mrs. Weatherby. She understood that the glove proved Lady Ashburn had gone to Sir Reginald that night. But she did not yet understand that this made Lady Ashburn not the murderer, but the woman Harcourt had killed to protect." "Protect?" Harcourt laughed. "You think I killed that American to protect Elspeth?" "No," said Poirot. "At first, perhaps, you meant only to frighten Miss Armitage. You met her near Fort Montague. She told you what she had learned. Worse, she told you what she believed." "What?" "That Lady Ashburn had killed her husband." Lady Ashburn covered her face. Poirot's voice softened. "You could not bear it. For 7 years you had preserved your beautiful private myth, that you had saved the woman you loved. Then this woman with her notebook arrived and called Lady Ashburn a murderess. She made your grand sacrifice ugly. She made it foolish. She made it useless." Harcourt was breathing heavily now. "She knew nothing." "No, but she would have learned. You struck her in anger. When she fell, you dragged her to the well. The bicycle was left to make it appear she had wandered there. Then panic came. You searched her room for the notes naming you. Finding none, you staged the glove and the lipstick warning. That was your mistake." "My mistake?" The sentence was angry. Not cautious. A cautious murderer hides. An angry one explains himself. There was a silence. Then Lady Ashburn rose. "Philip," she said, "tell me it is not true." That, I think, finished him. He looked at her for a long time. All the arrogance drained out of him, leaving only an aging, disappointed man. "He laughed," Harcourt said. "Reggie laughed after you left. He said Daniel would be nothing by morning. He said you would learn obedience. I took the bronze ashtray from the table. I only meant—" He stopped. No one helped him. "And the girl?" asked Cartwright. Harcourt looked down. She would not stop talking. It was a poor epitaph for Eleanor Armitage, but murderers are seldom poets. Inspector Cartwright took him away before dawn. When the house had emptied, Lady Ashburn remained by the window, watching the pale light gather over the sea. "Daniel Merritt died in Barbados 3 years ago," she said. "Fever. I received 1 letter after he was gone. He had not hated me." Poirot bowed his head. "That is sometimes all the mercy life gives us, madame." She looked at him. "And Miss Armitage?" "She died because she disturbed a lie, but also because she came close to the truth. There are worse legacies." As we drove back to the hotel, Nassau was waking. The harbour glittered again. White houses shone. The palms moved lazily in the breeze. "Paradise," I said, though with less confidence than before. Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "No Hastings, merely a beautiful place. Never confuse the two." Historical Epilogue, The Real Well at Nassau. This story was inspired by the strange and brutal death of Betty Renner, sometimes recorded as Betty Renner, an American lawyer from Washington, D.C., who died in Nassau in April 1950. 7 years earlier, Nassau had been shaken by one of the most notorious unsolved murders in the British Empire: the killing of Sir Harry Oakes, a fabulously wealthy gold mining magnate, murdered in his bed in 1943. His son-in-law, Alfred de Marigny, was tried and acquitted, but the case never truly closed. It left behind the worst kind of legacy: gossip, class suspicion, political embarrassment, and the belief that someone important had got away with murder. Betty Renner's death became attached to that legend. Contemporary and later accounts claimed she had come to Nassau to investigate the Oakes murder, or that she had been saying she knew who the real killer was. Her body was found battered and partly unclothed in a well or banana hole near Nassau. Her murder, like Oakes's, was never solved. But there is an important caution. The dramatic version, that Renner was definitely in Nassau to solve the Oakes case, is disputed. A critical review of the Oakes literature notes that some earlier claims may have been repeated as fact without solid evidence, and that Renner's family and friends insisted she was simply in Nassau as a tourist. That uncertainty is exactly what makes the case so haunting. If she was investigating Oakes, then her death looks like the second act of a larger conspiracy. If she was merely a tourist, then the legend swallowed her real story and turned her into a footnote to a rich man's murder. No one was convicted for Betty Renner's killing. No final answer emerged. Nassau kept its beauty, the Oakes case kept its shadows, and the woman in the well remained one more unanswered question in a place that had already learned the value of silence. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of The Well at Nassau. This was a case in which the murder of Eleanor Armitage was not the beginning of the story, but the second act, the echo of a 7-year-old killing that Nassau had agreed to forget. Philip Harcourt had not killed Sir Reginald Ashburn for money or for power. He had killed him because the man laughed at the wrong moment, and because Harcourt had built his entire private mythology on the idea that he was the one who protected Lady Ashburn. When Miss Armitage arrived with her notebook and her questions and called Lady Ashburn a murderess, she did not merely threaten Harcourt with exposure. She made his grand sacrifice ugly, foolish, and useless. He struck her not as a calculating killer, but as a vain man whose story had been taken from him. Our detective saw through it, because the lipstick warning on the mirror was angry, not cautious. And a cautious murderer hides, but an angry one explains himself. What lingers is the historical weight beneath the fiction. The real inspiration is the unsolved death of Betty Renner, an American woman found dead in a well near Nassau in 1950, 7 years after the notorious murder of Sir Harry Oakes, a case that was never closed and that left behind the worst kind of legacy: gossip, class suspicion, and the belief that someone important had got away with it. Whether Renner was investigating the Oakes murder or was simply a tourist swallowed by the legend remains disputed to this day. No one was convicted. Nassau kept its beauty. The Oakes case kept its shadows, and the woman in the well remained one more unanswered question in a place that had already learned the value of silence. If this kind of mystery stayed with you, the ones set in beautiful places where the sun makes the shadows shorter but does not purify the soul, where old money protects old crimes, and the most dangerous man is the one who mistook vanity for love. Tell us in the comments when you stop trusting Harcourt and what you make of the real case behind the fiction. Tell us, too, where you'd like us to travel next. More colonial islands, more unsolved history, more wells that kept their secrets, or somewhere the paradise is real. And if you'd like to support Nocturnal Tales and help keep these full-length mysteries coming, you'll find links in the description for Patreon and for one-off tips via Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. Our ebook, Nocturnal Tales, The Collected Mysteries, Volume 2, is also available for $3.99 on Patreon Gumroad, and buy me a coffee. For now, thank you again for staying with us to the last line. Until the next case, be wary of beautiful places that have learned to keep quiet, never confuse paradise with merely a beautiful place, and remember, the most dangerous lie is the one a man tells himself about why he killed, because vanity, unlike guilt, never asks to be forgiven.